And when you add randomness, then I want to see what happens to the exposures. And is there a really big difference? Is there a trade-off from adding randomness and not adding randomness, or maybe adding an extra unique? I think all of that you should compare when running NBA lineups. What's up, party animals? Sorry about yesterday, no podcast. The podcast systems were down for some odd reason. I tried publishing, I recorded everything, and then had troubles publishing, whatever it was. I emailed, hopefully that's resolved very soon. I think the Spotify issue had something to do with that for you Spotify listeners. So sorry about that. Before we get to today's video, you guys did comment, and you commented below. I picked one, at least on the last video, I picked one that I liked the most. That went to HWL Wiffle. What a pretty good answer to yesterday's question. He gets the whole video, but he thinks there's some benefits of playing the Ted Gins of the world, he says. Mainly, they allow you to move up the ladder at other positions without sacrificing correlation. Fair. If Breeze has a GPP winning score, does Ted Ginn have a GPP winning score at his price? He thinks there's a good chance. Variance is just magnified playing these guys, he says, and with the payout structure, high variance is the way to go in his opinion. I value answers like that because they spark conversation and get my juices flowing a little bit, so thank you for that answer. If you could tweet me at mlaura on Twitter, I'd love to hand you your Millie ticket. Hey, if you win the Millie, 10%, baby, 10%, man. If you guys want to win a Millie ticket as well, $20 on Draftkings. If you want it on Fanduel, wherever you want it, I'll gladly give it to you. All you have to do is comment below to today's question of the day. Subscribe and like, of course. Today's question of the day is, what are your optimal NBA settings? And I guess for the sake of that example, let's assume it's like a 7-gamer or something. Comment below with your optimal NBA settings that you'd run in Fantasy Cruncher, your optimizer, whatever you use. What are your optimal NBA settings? That's what we're talking about today. We had an NBA slate yesterday. We have a few now leading up towards Sunday. So let's focus on NBA just a tad bit here. And it's a question I've always thought about. Yesterday's topic, if there was a podcast, would have been what would happen if you just run the optimizer optimal settings, like one unique, I guess using most of your salary, maybe 49,500 on DraftKings, 59,500 on FanDuel, and just have no randomness, just straight let it go. And I ran this, it's funny because I ran this on FanDuel yesterday. Granted, there was a whole Ingram stuff and things were shaking a ton, but I ran this on FanDuel yesterday and turned out a pretty decent profit, right? And on DraftKings, I wasn't around to late swap, yada yada. It didn't work out, but I decided to try this in my crunches from yesterday and just see how it would have worked out, right? So here, let's go to rewind real quick, and I have two crunches here. For the sake of this, I'm going to name this one unique 0% because it's 0% randomness. This is one unique 20% randomness, right? And what we're going to do here is just kind of go over what the exposures look like for just a second, right? If you were to run just one unique, nothing else, 49,500 is my minimum salary. This is for DraftKings. You go down and obviously you're going to have some guys close to 100. In this case, Boucher and Favors, right? But as you go down, these are the guys that I'm kind of looking at just to see what happens. And when you add randomness, then I want to see what happens to the exposures. And is there a really big difference? Is there a trade-off from adding randomness and not adding randomness, or maybe adding an extra unique? I think all of that you should compare when running NBA lineups. By the way, NBA is usually the sport we can project the most or project the best, right? So if we could minimize the amount of nonsense we have in our crunches, variance, uniques, randomness, I think that could help in the long term, but could cause for some swings, maybe a little bit more than you're used to, right? So let's see what happens. If I were to sort this, and this is, since it's 0% randomness, it's already sorted by my projection. I get it, Ingram didn't play, but I'm not hindsighting anything. This is just for the sake of the crunch, right? I go all the way down, and I see where my 100th lineup is, 288. If I go to the top and say, Well, 291 to 288, that's nothing. 3 points is all that separates my first lineup from my 100th lineup. That's actually pretty darn good, right? So here's what I want to do. I think a lot of people when they play NBA don't really use the most unique or the most optimal settings. It's really, really tough to do that because it takes a long time. It's what happens if you have five or news coming out 5 minutes before lock, and then you don't like having that tight of a core. At least some people don't. I think the majority don't like having guys, or even 2 guys, 3 guys closer to 100%. It gives them like anxiety knowing that everything is hinged on these 3 guys. But if you have just solid projections, the best projections you can make, that probably isn't a bad thing, right? So in that first test, there was a 3-point difference. If we go to the 1 unique 20% randomness, you already see that percentages start looking a bit different here. And if we were to sort by, my projected, right? Same thing that we had in the last crunch. We have 291. And if we scroll all the way down, we have 282. This is our very last projected lineup. If we were to run 150, this number's even more. 282 is a big difference from 288. And by the time my 1 unique 0% randomness gets all the way to 282, I'd have, I don't know, 300-400 lineups by the time I get there. Who knows? If in 100 I went down 3 points and I still needed to go 6 more, that could be 300 lineups in total for me to get all the way to 282. Obviously, I'm assuming. So a couple of things right off the bat. There's already a huge gap between your projected scores when you add randomness. And if you add 10% randomness, yeah, the number will be lower, but there's still a gap there. And because optimizers aren't really trained, well, nowadays they're trained to just run the fastest they can so you have time. You have to understand that, because I know this from the back end, when an optimizer is quick and they spit out, like, for example, you use whatever optimizer you use and you ask for 100 lineups, and really quickly you get 100 lineups, like within 10 seconds, it's because they're sacrificing accuracy. Think about that for a second, right? Like, you're not going to get the 291 to 288 that you got in the first crunch, right, with no randomness. This one also took a little bit more time to crunch fully than did the 1 unique 20% randomness one. But the other one, since it's using randomness and range of outcomes, it doesn't really matter if it's all too accurate because it knows it's using a range for every player in here, right? And the more players you have, and the more players it has to calculate a range for, anywhere, like, for example, if Marcus Smart was projected at 30 and I had a 20% randomness, like every other optimizer uses randomness, it would be anywhere from, what is this, 24 all the way to 36. And it'll pick a random number in there, right? And that's not right. That's why it goes so fast, because it doesn't really matter where it's in. As long as it's somewhere in there, keep going. Somewhere in there, keep going. Somewhere in there, keep going. And that's how it kind of crunches everything. And next thing you know, you make 100 lineups, 150 lineups. For those that play multiple tournaments and run 500 lineups across many tournaments, you are going from 291, man, to like 260 down here probably when you run all those lineups. And that's just a huge gap. It's a lot of projection that you are sacrificing just to be different in tournaments. And at some point you have to think, law of diminishing returns. I'm getting way too different here. I'm playing such suboptimal plays to where, man, it's to the point where, okay, I got to stop implementing more randomness and more uniques. I get it, being contrarian is cool and that's fine and dandy, but when you're sacrificing this much, starts getting a little bit cray-cray. And in my opinion, running just the most optimal lineup, period, every single day, and then differentiating one all the way down could probably be the best way to go. One last thing here, if you look at the top projected lineup, and we're back in the regular crunch, right? If you look at the top projected lineup and then you look at the next one, the only thing that's different here is DeJounte Murray and Mike Conley, right? That's actually 1 unique. But if you go down and you keep going to the next one, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis are 2 uniques that were not in the ones before, right? And now it's not always 1 unique. It's at least 1 unique per lineup, but it doesn't always have to be 1 unique. It could be 2. So when you say minimum 3 uniques, for those that incorporate, higher amounts of uniques, that could be your issue, to where it's not just 3 uniques. Maybe it uses 4 and 5. And next thing you know, your 100th lineup is also at 280, and you're sacrificing a lot that way. So keep in mind all of this that's going on when you add randomness or add uniques. To me, the most optimal way of making NBA lineups, just let it ride, especially if you have the time, man. No randomness. Get 1 unique, get a tight core, and if you win, you win. You lose, you lose. You're not going to lose all of it, and you just get it back the next day. I get it. Payout structures are tough, but this is another level of risk, which still makes a lot of sense. Thank you guys for watching. Of course, if you could, click that thumbs up, subscribe, and remember to comment below. I'll give you guys as much as I can every single day this week. Sorry about the podcast stuff. I'll fix that. And of course, if you want to catch me live, twitch.tv/mlora. Catch you guys then, baby.